Bachelor of Screen Production is a partnership between Excelsior College and Sydney Film School. Excelsior's pedigree in the academic world is second to none. Sydney Film School, we teach filmmakers how to make films. So in this course you get both the theory and the practical merged together so that you understand what it is to not only tell stories but actually execute them so that you can deliver those to an audience. Excelsior has a wonderful campus, including a theatre, and students study there for some of their subjects, and 25 minutes away they study at Waterloo Studios, which is the home of Sydney Film School. Waterloo Studios is a fully functioning production studio. We have sound stages, edit suites, rehearsal rooms, screening rooms, and the equipment that we use is professional. We have partnerships with a whole range of different professional suppliers. We've put everything under the one roof. If students are interested in making films, there's no better place than studying with us because we bring all the elements of film together. Between Excelsior and Sydney Film School, we have an extensive network of professional relationships that don't just span for Sydney, they actually span all over the world. I wish I was 18 again and I could start this program. It has the right balance between the theoretical aspects of filmmaking, the understanding of storytelling, but also the philosophical elements of what are you going to make films about. We effectively push you off the cliff. We get you to fly. We get you to go out and make films in an incredibly supportive and an inspiring environment. And we really have one saying, which is this: your vision. We want you to make the films only you can make. We get you to understand who you are, why you want to tell these stories, how to execute the stories, and ultimately how to make the film. And here's the greatest thing: share your stories with the world.
Well, if you're in the film business, then right now I'm certain that times are uncertain. Will things go back to what we knew before, or will it be a very new and uncharted world? Well, g'day, my name is Luke Weston, and joining me is the wonderful Mel Way.
Yay, thanks Luke. And right now we're going to see if we can shed some light on that question as we're joined by Stu Harris of Story Strategist.
Yes, today they're going to be talking with writer-director Stuart Hazeldine from London and the President of Marketing and Distribution from Aspiration Entertainment, Erik Lokkesmoe from Nashville. Stu and his guests will be exploring what the film business will look like beyond COVID-19, how the industry will transition back to work, and what opportunities exist to develop engaging stories with rich, interesting characters. So with that, a massive thanks to Excelsior College, and let's join Stu, and Erik. I wish there was another Stu, but his name's Erik.
Okay, well, welcome to the Connect 20 Online Media and Arts Summit, both of you gentlemen. Erik and Stuart. Erik all the way from Nashville, USA, and Stuart from London, United Kingdom, my homeland, and I'm obviously in Australia, suffering in the colonies here. But welcome to both of you, and I really appreciate you both joining me for this conversation that we're going to have today.
Good to be here.
Great to see you both. I guess the best thing to kick things off is really just to hear how you both are doing and how things are affecting you sort of personally, but with the current situation with coronavirus around the world, but especially just from your context of being in the film industry. You guys both on lockdown, you're at home. What does life look like for you both at the moment? Erik, maybe you can get started.
Let's see, I can hear 3 kids upstairs, a puppy scratching at the door. So work is a bit of trying to keep things moving and manage household, but also vocation. So, but overall, very kind of excited about our work and this moment of disruption. I think there's some positive things happening even in this very dark and difficult time for everybody. So I'm just trying to think small and see God's grace in small things, and spend time with my kids and my wife and just settle into whatever comes.
How about yourself, Stuart? London looking beautiful today. I know there's a sun rays just peeking over your shoulder there.
Yeah, definitely the sun and the warming temperatures helps lift the spirits when you're stuck inside. Assuming you are allowed to go out, which as of a few days ago we are allowed to go out a bit more than we could before. It's a strange time because I think you become very aware of the changes in your own life, and also the changes of your family's lives, your relatives, and then what's happening to your society in general, to the world, to your country. So your mind is working on different tracks, and on one day you can be depressed about your family, but happy about your own life, but scared about the world, and it can change from day to day. So it's been kind of a strange thing. Personally, most of my life when I'm not directing is writing, which means working at home in social life. And most people, you find yourself feeling some guilt because you know that around you, maybe they wish they were in lockdown, but they can't. They're working in hospitals, in ICUs, or they just don't have the kind of personality that does well living at home alone. And there's infinite complications. So you feel a little bit of guilt that I think all of us are aware that there's a hospital just down the street where there may be a war zone going on. So emotionally, I think it's a very confusing time. But I've just been trying to do what I feel like I was put on the earth to do, which is write stories and tell stories. I started writing a script on day one of lockdown. And last Sunday, I finished the first draft. And now I'm writing a TV pilot that I'm being paid to write. So I feel incredibly blessed that I have a job right now. And I'm just trying to do that to the best of my ability. But it is definitely a weird time for everyone.
Yeah, I presume your favorite place to write is probably right where you are right now, as opposed to a park bench. So presumably
Yes.
Things haven't changed a huge amount for you in that sense when you're writing.
I do miss having a couple of days a week in a coffee shop, though. Just being able to sit there with a cup of tea and a pastry and watch the world go by. It's weird when you don't have the option, because I always did. And the moment the government said you can't leave home, all I wanted to do was leave home. We have that natural thing of don't tell me what to do, and you miss going out to a restaurant. You miss this. We're all experiencing this, and it's very rare. I was just reading an article by the director Michael Mann yesterday, and he was saying that in his lifetime he can't remember a time when the whole planet was united in one kind of feeling since the year of 1968, when there were protests going all around the world and the war and France and everything. And he felt like at that time that everyone was unified in spirit. And he said this is the first time since then. And I think we are all kind of, only 6 months ago, your life and Erik's life and my life would have been maybe quite different. But now there's a rhythm that we're all sharing. And as horrible as a lot of what's happening is right now, and a lot of grief going on, as Erik said, things are there's opportunities in destruction. Crisis breeds opportunity. So it's a case of what are those opportunities? Not necessarily opportunities to get ahead, but opportunities of how can we make our lives better and how can we make the world better. We're all being forced into a 2-month quiet time. We're all going to the desert for our 40 days, our 60 days.
Right.
And if you come back from the desert with all that meditation time and you haven't figured out a way to live better and make your society work better, what were you waiting for? What other opportunity are you waiting for to rethink things? So I'm kind of excited and intrigued to see some of the maybe unplanned good things that will come from this.
Yeah.
I would just say that I think there's this for the creative community, there's this pressure to perform right now, because exactly what Stu said is you have time, there's no distractions, you're forced at home. And so there is this pressure that many of my artist friends are feeling to get something done. And I've been trying to say, listen, what's the small win today? Is it a line of your screenplay? Is it a new melody that comes to your head? Is it 45 minutes of just dreaming about what the future looks like for you? And I think that's important to tell people that there's going to be some that just have a screenplay done, their first draft done in 2 months. Others are going to have just to reflect and contemplate what is coming and how can they fit into this new reality. So we just got to be careful with artist communities, especially.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned there, obviously, how people are feeling. What kind of impact do you think, Erik, this is having certainly this is having a significant impact on everybody's lives, and we're hearing these stories about how it's obviously going to affect and delay film production around the world. But what kind of long-term impact and also thematic influence do you think this pandemic will have on the industry?
Well, I think no one really knows how it's all going to play out. We know certain things are going to be delayed. I do think that if you are in development, so Stu's case where he's creating, or you're in my case of distributing finished product, you're okay. If you are in production, you're stopped. If you're in post, you may be doing something a little bit hybrid at home. So it's this in this conversation we have kind of development, writing, imagining a story, and then my work right now is we're getting films out, especially digitally. I think theatrical has always been a challenge for the last decade or more, and it's going to be more of a challenge when people have developed habits over the last few months that they can experience entertainment and actually a closer form of intimacy with artists. So you see this in book readings where there's no more gatekeepers, there's no more mediating platforms or experiences. It's directly to consumer. So I don't know if out of this, there's certainly going to be the crowd that wants to get out and see a beautiful story or a big story on the screen. I think there's going to be, with Universal's decision on Trolls and now with Scoob coming out, is it going to be that more and more of the studios especially do direct to home, direct to device? But I'm actually, to answer quickly your second question, is really, I'm very hopeful the audience, I'm excited about the audience, what's happening that I see, which is intentionality about entertainment. And there is this escapism, but there's a lot more of people wanting to find meaning and layers and depth and that conversation and trying to discover something that's real and rooted in story and in creative works. I think that's happening more and more. And so that's encouraging to us.
Yeah, that's good. And I know, Stuart just mentioned briefly there, you took me to one of the films I know you worked on before, 40 Days in the Desert with Ewan McGregor, and Stuart took me there for just a moment when you were saying that this is like our 40 days or our extended quiet time together in some ways. But Stu, maybe you can just help us. There's been many films, over the years with these kind of apocalyptic themes and films that explore other things like life after death and so on. It kind of feels like we're living our own pandemic or contagion right now. What kind of impact do you think these themes will have for writers, for producers now?
Well, whenever you get into a crisis, I think audiences tend to polarize. They tend to look for pure escapism. They want to fly off into the world of a Frozen or a Star Wars or a historical epic. Or they want to really lean into what's happening right now and figure out how to process that immediately. Other people maybe take a little bit longer. I mean, the most rented movie on iTunes in the first month of lockdown was Contagion, which was literally the closest movie that you could get to what's happening right now. So many people flocked to that and said, I want to see if I can learn from this. They obviously didn't want to just see more people die. They want to say, what can I take from this about the nature of where things might go next, how I could respond, etc. So I think wherever you're going to fix your flag as a culture maker, you probably either want to help people escape or you want to help people understand. I respect both, but I think my internal focusing has always been towards trying to process what's going on and maybe just try and put some kind of moral or social process signpost towards, a better way of thinking about things. So I'm always fascinated by the contagions. There are a lot of apocalyptic movies, and I've worked on a few of them, the movie Knowing and The Day the Earth Stood Still, about, the end of society, etc. If you're the kind of person who looks at that and you just get filled with fear, then probably that's not the right kind of movie for you to be looking at right now. And I do really feel that there are as many movies out there that suit different people as there are personality types. So there are movies that are good for you and movies that aren't good for you, but they might be good for the next person. So I'm drawn to those kind of end of the world movies, as long as there's something positive in there about how you deal with them. The Day the Earth Stood Still was about trying to avert environmental crisis and pleading with an alien to give us another chance. Only in pain and crisis is when we actually change, and we're just feeling the pain now, is what John Cleese's character says to Keanu Reeves' Klaatu. And we worked on that speech, me and another writer in turn, and that was the message of that. Whereas knowing it was more about the personal, familial side of a scientific son and a religious father coming together in the face of an apocalypse and actually finding some common ground again. So that's another way of looking at it. So I'm quite fascinated, but there is, I think, in terms of us looking at future stories, there's a bit of a crisis of meaning going on right now, which I think all storytellers are feeling. When we come out of the other side of this, the same kinds of stories as before we went into lockdown, because none of us are going to make anything so quickly that it can come out in the next month or two. So we're really thinking, what kind of stories do we want to make that come out a year, 2 or 3 years afterwards when we're looking back? Remember when I was a teenager, this rash of Vietnam movies came out that were all 10 years after the war had ended. Finally, people were ready to look back at what happened and say, let's deal with this now, because we couldn't deal with it really at the time. At the time, it was John Wayne and the Green Berets and let's kill those horrible Viet Cong. 10 years later, it was Platoon and it was, we screwed up.
Yeah.
So I think it will be interesting to see where we come now. I was planning a script before this that had nothing to do with the pandemic. I had to decide at the beginning of lockdown, am I going to spend the next 6 weeks writing this? Because if I make it, I don't know if people are going to care what the world cared about last year. I just decided to do it because I was in that frame of mind. I still don't know. I honestly couldn't tell you the answer. I just believe that you should finish what you start. And as I was going, I started getting a story about the pandemic. And I was very nervous about it because so many writers were saying, there's going to be 300 pandemic movies coming in 2022. And I thought, I don't want to be a part of that. But at the same time, I did have a story in my mind, and I thought maybe there is room for a bunch. So I've been in the background as it is unfolding in real time. I've been throwing down a handful of beats every day. I don't know if I'll write it, but just in case, that's my pandemic plan B movie.
Yeah. And having lived those moments, though, kind of, isn't it funny how you watch a film like Contagion or Pandemic or whatever, and they have, now we're living in this moment ourselves. I guess what's the difference that you see in humanity or the stories that you're hearing around you that might challenge the way that you might have written the character? What would our character look like as we come out of this situation ourselves? What do you think's changed for us as humans?
Well, I don't know how you guys feel, but everything was so intense in that first month of lockdown, where every morning you woke up and there was 10 times more news physically. More things had changed, death rates and government things and whatever. It was overwhelming. A lot of people did short circuit. I can take in a lot more information than the average person. I gorge on it. But even my reaction was not on the day to feel overwhelmed, but in retrospect, I almost can't bear thinking about what happened a month ago. I'm struggling enough to deal with what's just happened on the news today. So when we come out of that, will there be this collective amnesia for 2 years where we just don't want to think about what happened? And then one day we do. It's like the fluctuations of the stock market, or what do we want to think about? So I don't know whether people are really going to want to, how much people are going to want to deal with it. I think people are just going to want to go out and smell some fresh air for a while. But there will be a moment where we collectively start to look back and then get lessons from the past. Say, let's not make this happen again.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And Erik, what do you think? Do you still believe that we're living in the greatest moment in the history of modern storytelling, as you once wrote?
I think so. Did I say that?
You did.
With Stu on the line, I can say it. I just was, early on, it was interesting. This is early on, being a couple months ago. It was the essential and non-essential worker. And that is a very dangerous thing in God's economy of vocation. that somehow yes, they're essential, and we get the first responders are an amazing class of people. But you saw that many of the artists felt that they were non-essential, that felt their work was after all these things were put in place. Then we get back to the arts. And man, I think what you're doing and what Stu talks about and is working on, it's the arts are never more important now. And the artist has to lean into the brokenness and the confusion and be interpreters for us and help us make sense of the meaning that we're all looking for. And so I just have been trying to, whatever I can do to say, patrons, let's support the artists now. They're hurt. They're on the front lines of concerts being canceled. Certainly in national community, you have so many musicians out of work. Any public performances of any kind, no public gatherings. And so the trickle or the flood of destruction economically, not just health reasons, has been hitting the artist. So we have to rally around the artist in our churches and as patrons. And, this morning I gave $25 to an artist who had a new album out. And just, got to do something because these new artists are coming up and they're making something. I would just add that someone said, much smarter than me, said, every day is Holy Saturday. And, I talked a lot about the middle space and that place that I think we live in. And I do feel like we're in everyday Holy Saturday, this tension of, we know the side of the cross, we know there's a resurrection and new life coming and the victory has been claimed, but we are living in that Holy Saturday moment, as the Apostles' Creed said, that Christ is sent into hell. So we may be in different layers of what hell looks like, but I do think it's really been interesting for all of us who are in vocations of all types and as audiences and as sub-creators of the master artist to be living in that Holy Saturday moment and not just dabbling in it, because I do that. I jump into that middle, jump out. We're just in it. And I think it's really interesting to see what stories are created out of this. And I'm kind of excited to see, as Stu mentioned, what lands on the screen in our Spotify accounts coming in the next months or years to come.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's kind of the question of what beauty is going to come from the ashes that we see from here as we're put under this sort of pressure. I'm equally intrigued to see what the future looks like from a storytelling point of view. But I love what you just shared there as well about the artist, and that's definitely something that we're trying to achieve with the summit here as well, is to bring storytellers together of all different disciplines, from musicians to fine artists and filmmakers and so on, and just sort of help give people the space to talk through some of these things as well that we're seeing. I love the optimism as well, though, that you just expressed there in terms of what maybe people will be dreaming, what stories will be developed in this season. Stuart, do you think that, I'm interested in characters here as well. I know that obviously that being a writer, that's something that you procrastinate the most about, is how do you develop a character? What do you have to put them through to help steer your audience in the direction that you want to go to? Particularly now, not necessarily just in this situation we're in right now with coronavirus, but in recent years, have you seen more of an appetite for the development of more wholesome characters, if you like? Talk to me a little bit about character development and what you're seeing happen, especially in film, but by all means touch on TV as well if you feel so.
Well, I think in general, the focus is more on characters than it ever has been, as opposed to plot, etc., simply because of the way that we consume media now. We're now binging on shows that run on for 10 episodes, 5 seasons. And inevitably, when you do that, the thing that pulls you through are the characters. So the plot can change from week to week, but you're really with the characters much more than the plot. And I grew up with the silver screen and with the 2-hour beginning, middle, and end. So I think intrinsically my storytelling sensibilities were formed a lot more around theme and plot. Not that it was not about character, but it's really about a character in a moment. Whereas with these TV shows, you're living with these characters for much longer. And I don't know that you could say that one is better or worse, but they're certainly different. And there are certainly some writers who instinctively are more attuned for film and others for TV. And I've been more of a film person, and it's taken me a long time to find a TV show that I feel I want to spend that long in that universe with those characters. And I think I might have just found it. So that's a new journey for me, because I want to sit down with my dinner at 8:00, and by 10 p.m. I want a real emotional climax of laughing or being scared or something. I want to feel that thing in the gymnasium, the endorphins, and then go to bed, rather than, I just watched 3 episodes tonight and whatever. So there is that. So we're maybe we're changing our story brains and the part of our brains that consumes entertainment in a way that I don't understand. We all get to that point in our lives where we realize that our industry, our leisure time changed in a way that we never expected when we got into that industry at 20 or 25. We just thought it would always be that way. And I never knew, getting in at 25 and selling scripts, that within 20 years, we would all be watching everything on our TV screens with shows that ran on for 8 seasons. And that would be the main thing. That in my own career. As far as the kinds of characters that we're dealing with, I have to personally say I'm really not a fan of the word wholesome. I don't know what the word wholesome gives you, because to me it feels like an ending. It doesn't feel like a beginning or a middle. It's like, if you're wholesome, you've got no problem. So why are we looking at your life? Like if you look at the Old Testament, David, Solomon, all these guys, wholesome is the last word that comes into your mind. They're very passionate and very devoted, and there are moments of like giving everything to God. But they're also committing adultery and violence and struggle and all that kind of stuff. And that doesn't feel particularly wholesome to me. You could say Jesus is wholesome, but that's almost like wholesome in the best sense of the word is a goal. It's where we want to get to. But for me, drama is conflict. So it's either about someone who is broken, who is somehow crawling towards wholesome. I don't like wholesomeness and I don't like purity, but it's crawling towards health, emotional, mental health. Or it's someone who's already in that place, who's under immense pressure to fall apart. But it's movement. They often say in the press that you build someone up and then the press likes to break them down. It's because they like movement. They want a story. A story only happens when you go from low to high or from high to low. That's comedy, tragedy, or whatever. That's what it is. So I definitely think that we can focus people on characters who are figuring out that the bad way that they're going is not getting them anywhere, and that they need change. That's what repentance is turning around and heading towards a new place. This is who I want to be now. And we can focus on that as a society as well, how individuals deal with a crisis or deal with pressure, and how a society does. I was really impressed a year or two ago by Dunkirk, because Chris Nolan was saying quite rightly that that's a movie about communal heroism. It's about a whole group of people joining together to do something, and he did it through the lens of an RAF pilot and just a regular guy piloting a boat and some soldiers on a beach. But he gave us a patchwork sense of a nation pulling together to pull 250,000 young boys out of the mouth of hell and bring them back. And I love that, because it's rarely done and it's very hard to do. So I'm kind of interested in telling more stories where you can maybe show a bunch of people pulling together. But I am also working on a feature project that's about one particular man, an American soldier, who went through a great storm in his life, a true story. And he watched his father, he grew up in the Great Depression and watched his father fall apart under the pressure of the economic pressure of the Great Depression, and made a decision that if a great storm hits me in my life, I'm going to be ready for it. I'm not going to fall apart. And he started training himself as a teenager, but he didn't know what he was training himself for. And I was just saying to my producers today, in the light of how unprepared most of the Western governments were, especially the British and American governments, for this cataclysm that has happened, that's even more prescient. Looking at someone who's trying to get ready for a storm, and then the storm hits and he almost drowns as well, like his father, but he manages to find a way to survive and actually triumph and become a hero. And that's the kind of story that I was drawn to and I want to tell right now.
I love that. I love it.
Erik, do you tell me about your, how do you respond to that in terms of character, and I'm kind of particularly interested in this sort of middle space. I know that's something that we've talked about before, and you've written a lot about it as well. But how do we see more, the development of characters that, and I like the way you course corrected me there, Stuart, as well. Of course, is that characters aren't wholesome necessarily all the way through. Otherwise, they're just boring, right? I mean, how do we create stories that are not just sort of bland, but we want to see character development, and we want to see story that actually leads towards redemption, helps people understand, repentance, these kind of themes. As Christians, as filmmakers, we want to kind of, lead audiences towards. To talk to us a little bit about how, the things that you're seeing in the industry, certainly in the United States.
Well, I think the next half an hour should be about words that should not be used by Christians.
Let's make a list.
I mean, one word I always think of is safe. I don't know if there's any word of safe in the Bible. And so a couple of years ago, we put out I think part of the challenge of the middle space is you can't define it. So it's like, we're not that or that. It's always this pushing back, and there's no clear definition. And so you got to know that you're in the middle if you don't have a definition for it, for what you're working on. But when I sent this survey it's like 1,000 people responded with how they describe the art that they do love and drawn to and create. And I think there's some trends there that it was about seeing life through a poetic view and layers and honesty. And partly you could see that a lot of things we learn and we love about great characters are things that we learn in elementary school, to tell the truth, play well with others. I mean, there's these essential truths that are embedded in us, how we view. But I think telling the truth is important. I completely agree with Stu that a view of life versus a prescriptive. I think there's kind of camps that are dividing here. Some in the church in particular love stories that are fixing the world, that the characters come out the other side and it's all good. In 2 hours at 10 o'clock, you feel like the world is made right. And I know we all have that desire, because that is our story, that someday all things will be made new and will be renewed and the cosmos will be redeemed. Okay, so we get that and we're drawn to that story. But I do think we can't rush there without having characters that show us the and not even the full depravity of man, because I think those stories are quick to go. And this is why I like Stu's writings, that you can easily go, oh, they're evil, and create the evil character. But it's the almost like, the Breaking Bad Ozark series, where it's these small decisions that the evil becomes enticing, or the darkness becomes a little bit a different shade. And it's done over that series, many seasons. And I think I stand in myself, I see characters like, that little turn over time is a far away from what the true gospel is. I think it's helpful to remind the church of that. I think that just a macro level, it's easy for those of us who really love the middle space and believe in it, who love the history of the arts and believe that the church needs to reclaim that history of astonishing works of art, that we tend to say, well, we get it and they don't. And we leave the church behind, not the building the church, the capital C body of Christ. And all that I'm hoping to do is say, there's actually so many better stories being created by pagans and those that are not in our faith, that are so rich with meaning and truth and goodness and beauty, that we don't want to go over here and be limited in our imaginations and our depth of story. We need to see what's being created by those that share our faith or don't share our faith, because there is this shared story and the imago Dei of God, and that we can learn things from those that don't share our faith. We need to. So I'm always trying to nudge the church in my small way to say, there's a greater story, a better story being told than what, frankly, most in the church storytelling have created over the years, and have trained an audience and trained an industry that this is what Christian art looks like. It's easy to identify, it's easy to make, and at the end of the time, you're going to walk out confirmed in your faith. And I have no belief that art is about confirmation. It's about the margins to then contemplate and think through all the things you've experienced, which is what I love about Stu's art and what he does and so many others.
I'm just intrigued about what you just said there about filmmakers, especially those you said were pagans or, people of non-Christian faith that you're finding interesting. I'd love to hear some insight into some of the stories that you're seeing that are interesting and kind of move in that middle space, even maybe unconsciously or consciously, but without necessarily an agenda like a Christian movie may have.
Yeah. I think that word agenda is important. I don't want any artist to start their work knowing the end. And that was true when, I think as Madeleine L'Engle said this, when she was writing, there would be characters who'd walk in the door that she did not know that they were going to be in her story, that they would just surprise her in her writing. Now that to me is beautiful. Like that is, I don't care what you're making, that openness is powerful, because if I sketch out on my storyboard every little piece, because I know I want to get to that place at the end, I have a captive audience, I want them to feel this. I don't think that's art. I don't know. It's agenda, it's propaganda. I don't know what the nicer word would be, but it's really not the craft. I was surprised. I saw that on iTunes, I think, or Apple TV now, that Tombstone is the #1 movie right now rented. And I have no idea why that is. I was surprised that would be the top of the charts. So, going back in time, those kind of movies to me are fascinating. But even more recently, the movies that were in the award season, I thought were incredible. Uncut Gems, Parasite. I thought 1917 was unbelievable. On and on. I think there's a whole class of movies that came out recently that any believer could look at and extract incredible meaning from. And then there's some that did some, just to quickly say, and I think Stu has a better list than I do. When we worked on Once You Were My Neighbor back here, what was interesting about that was it did fit in the middle because you had the two audiences came together. You had the nostalgic audiences like, oh, the sweet, safe Mr. Rogers who taught my children and I'm 60 years old. And those who longed for kindness in the Trump era, who in the coarseness of the world. And so 25-year-olds and 65-year-olds were weeping at the end of that movie and singing the song together. Now, that's what great art does, and that's a storytelling that allows us to enter into something that is really unique. But that was one of those examples we're so proud of. It just captured and swept over the audience in a way that was no agenda, just telling the facts more or less. So one example that we loved recently, not that recently, but last couple of years.
It's good. And I guess the opportunity is really to stimulate the conversation so that not necessarily the agenda, but the conversation can be had around the water cooler or hey, did you check out that movie with your friends when you're catching up in the office or, over the weekend with friends. I think that's maybe where the opportunity to unpack some of what happened in that story with people, as opposed to trying to load that into the 90 minutes on screen, if you like. Stuart, what are you seeing? I've got a blank sheet of paper here, and I'm kind of itching to write down what we should be looking at, what kind of stories should be, in our lists at the moment to be watching. So, what's interesting you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was just, I thought Won't You Be My Neighbor was a fantastic documentary, and Erik's right, it's the perfect subject matter for right now, for this era that we're in, where everything has gotten coarse and polarized, and people seem to suspect the worst of other people and of institutions and everything before, and they desperately need to be persuaded before they'll give any generosity towards them. But I was also thinking of the companion piece that fortuitously came out at the same time, Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, which had a particular conceit, which wasn't necessarily real, but the fictional story and the fictional Mr. Rogers he portrayed was a friend and a therapist who just gently woos the personal, draws the poison out of the journalist who's desperate. You can't be as pure as you look. I will find the dirt in you. And instead, he ends up giving up his own dirt. and that for me was just a really wonderful dynamic to see. I think that's a really good thing, not necessarily for the lockdown, but for just where society is right now. One of the most positive psychologist portrayals that I've seen. A lot of filmmakers right now are sharing their favorite lockdown movies. I'm liking the fact that this chance to step back is allowing a lot of people to review their own work and review the work of others that they like. I'm a soccer fan, and we have no soccer on TV, so that the commentators are all talking back over their careers and what are your favorite this and favorite that. And in art and in music, like that, every day Bono, I think, releasing like 5 letters that he's written to other artists whose work he loves. Prince, Bob Dylan, this song that you wrote changed my life because of this. So there's this great sort of paying tribute. And on Twitter, a lot of filmmakers are putting up stuff. Man, these are the movies I'm watching. And I'm doing the same. I found for some reason I've got into this rhythm of watching an old movie every night. A movie I always wanted to watch from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and I'm just slowly filling out my dance card. And a lot of them, are maybe not as great as I hoped they would be, or they don't speak to this moment, but sometimes they do. And last night I watched the old Burt Lancaster movie, Birdman of Alcatraz, which I had never seen, and I heard about it. It's a true story, and it's this guy who was seemingly an unreformable, incredibly stubborn, and occasionally very violent prisoner who murdered not one but 2 people in his first years at Leavenworth. The thing that opens him up is not meeting Mr. Rogers. It's finding a little bird in the exercise yard and picking it up and talking to it and I think fixing his wing or something. And within a short space of time, this guy has not only become like the most interesting prisoner in the penal system, but he's become one of the foremost ornithologist experts and sort of bird doctors in the US. And he gets all these special privileges because of it. It's a little bit like Andy Dufresne in Shawshank Redemption becoming like the accountant that everybody goes to in the prison. But it's something about rehabilitation, and there's a great conversation between Burt Lancaster's character and the prison warden, played by Carl Malden, I think, where he says, I've spent 30 years and you're the most stubborn, unreformable prisoner I've met. I thought you could change, but you're not changing. And he basically says, look, you have your idea of how you want people to change. Your idea of reforming is that we'll accept your form of conformity, your form of civility, and that you turn us into automatons. But the one thing that you're doing is you're destroying our individuality. And it's individuality that's part of what makes us who we are. And so you say that you're trying to give me dignity, but if you take away my individuality, how can I leave here with any dignity? And that means, and the proof of the pudding is half the people you let go end up back here. So you must be doing something wrong. If you have a 50% failure rate, change what you're doing. Definition of insanity. Keep doing the same thing, you don't get a different result. And I just thought, wow, they were having the same discussions back in the 50s and 60s as we're having now about our penal system, especially relevant to America, the highest level of incarceration in the world. Surely something's not working. Just as I think we're going to need to look back on what happened with this crisis response and say, we didn't respond too well, how can we do it better? So Birdman of Alcatraz was a great joy to me, and I just thought on a lot of different levels it really spoke to this moment, but also this general time in human history. So that's one I would throw on the list.
That's good.
But I want to jump in real quick that you mentioned Shawshank Redemption, which is like 25 years ago, right? 25-year anniversary. Crazy.
94,
Where did that time go?
Yeah. There's a scene there, Andy Dufresne, my favorite scene in the movie, and I think it does relate to our current moment, even beyond this moment. It's the prison yard scene where Andy Dufresne locks the door, takes this opera, puts it on the player, turns on the speaker in the prison yard, and there's that beautiful cinematic scene where everyone's there, and they stop what they're doing, and they stare up in the sky at the speaker. And he says, Red says, I don't know what that woman was singing, but there's something that even a prisoner could feel free again. And I thought, man, that I don't know if that was in the Stephen King book or not, a short story, but that moment is so profound about on so many levels that shame on us if we missed that a filmmaker who did not maybe or maybe not fully see the other side of this veil, through the veil, did that for an audience. Extraordinary.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think moments of transcendence are why I got into the industry. I always remember Harrison Ford saying that movies are emotional exercise, and they do tend to work much better to communicate emotions than communicate ideas, which is always a problem for some of the faith-based mindset. I don't think there's only one mindset in the faith-based world, but I think that there are some people who very much see movies as a Trojan horse to impart ideas, to get you thinking right, and who see scripture as an instruction manual that you must follow. And I think they struggle with the fact that they want film to be this, they want it to be more of that. And so they pay lip service to the emotions. The emotions come out very, very simplistic and not particularly sincere. And audiences can smell it. You know, we have this great facial recognition system where when the animation is slightly off, we know it's not a real person we're seeing, but an animated person. But we're the same with emotion. As well, and when we feel that emotion's even slightly not sincere, we react against it, and that's why a lot of faith-based filmmaking doesn't work, because it's not paying enough attention to how people genuinely emotionally react. Film at its best is quite an emotional medium, and also a very symbolic, metaphoric medium, because it's the medium of dreams and aspirations. So definitely Shawshank Redemption was one of those moments for me. It could be a moment of great spirit uplift. It could be, oh, Captain, my Captain, at the end of Dead Poets Society. I've been posting my 10 movie posters every day of movies that inspired me, and Dead Poets was one of them. Or it could be a moment of great heartbreak and tragedy. One of my other 10 movies was Platoon, which was I saw it at 15. It was one of the first movies I was allowed to go and see at the cinema on my own. I wasn't ready for how powerful it would be, and I came out crying for the first time ever in a movie. And vowing never to join an army and never kill anyone, because I was just like, I don't want to be part of that system. And that was the effect that it had on me. I could have gone to see Rambo the year before and seen the exact same body count, but come out wanting to join an army and kill as many people as possible, because you don't feel the deaths in Rambo. But in Platoon, you feel every death is a tragedy and a life lost that should have never even gone to Vietnam. So that's the power that movies can have on you, and I think especially in your teenage years, that's when you're in your formative years. You're trying to figure out, how do I want to live my life, and which way do I want to go? And Platoon was one of those films that really set me on this track and not that track. Dead Poets Society encouraged me to pursue the artistic life of my aspirations, and not to do just the thing that would get me the highest income and the best employment prospects. So that was me. Probably if you're a teenager in the 60s, it would have been The Graduate, when the guy says plastics, and you realize that it's not plastics, and Dustin Hoffman's character rejects that. So I want to create those moments for other people, those moments of emotional transcendence. That was one reason I took The Shack, is I felt that it would inspire people in a particular way to make some positive changes in their actual life. Not just in, oh, that was a wonderful movie, oh, I cried, but it would actually maybe inspire them to come out and make some changes in their real life in a positive way. I felt that people were going to pick up the phone and patch up broken relationships. And thanks to the miracle of Twitter, I found afterwards it actually did do that, because people would tweet. You know, I saw The Shack and I came out and I picked up the phone to my dad for the first time in 20 years. For me, that's amazing. And whilst I don't think entertainment needs to do that, it can perform many valuable functions just by distracting you or encouraging you. Something that just challenges you to do that extra, to be that better version of yourself, inspires me. I remember coming out of Titanic in 1997. It was so emotional that it made me want to pick up the phone to my ex-girlfriend and propose marriage. You know, that movies can do that to you, you know, and I definitely want to be a part of that. You know, I want to have that effect on people.
Yeah, so it's probably.
I love that. There's a I don't know if there's a picture for you, Stuart, as a writer director, is that I don't know who said this, but a director was saying that the worst thing for a director is not a review, bad review, good review. It's the person who goes to the mall and uses your movie for 2 hours of air conditioning and to pass the time and leave without ever thinking about it again. Like that. Yeah. Mindless, no impact, no emotional movement. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there are films that kind of provide, you know.
When the movie desperately, sorry, I
Sorry,
talked
say that again.
The opposite of that is when you go to the cinema and you desperately want to be moved, and the movie doesn't do it for you. The movie makes you forget it after 5 minutes.
That happens too. Yeah,
that's true.
You know, I was thinking that the movie that I don't want to forget that we miss saying is A Hidden Life, and I was, you know, I guess there is another critic that said this, that when Tree of Life came out, he said that if you watch it on the small screen, it's like brushing your teeth with your finger. And he said, I call bullshit on any church does not bust its parishioners like they did for Passion of the Christ to see Tree of Life. I think it's even more true for Hidden Life, that Malik made something that, I mean, I guess for those of the eyes to see, but those who see it, it's unbelievable. I mean, emotional. I mean, for me, and I think many others.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm intrigued to hear. Obviously, we were in lockdown, and Stuart, you mentioned you're obviously writing at the moment. You just mentioned that you finished your first draft of the of a screenplay for a feature, and you're working on a TV show. I mean, I guess are you going where to from here? Are you going to write an unusual number of drafts, given that we're in lockdown, or are you sort of going to move on to another project? What's your sort of process at the moment that you're facing?
Well, I have way more work than I can ever fit in. So in terms of my workload, I wouldn't say that anything has changed. It's more a case of what stories do you write, and then what can you do with them afterwards. We've mostly talked about the thematics, but there are obviously a lot of practical challenges that await the film industry in terms of how we come out of lockdown and make films safe again. And there is a lot of overlap, but I think the route out for mega budget films and the route out for tiny budget films and the route out for ongoing TV shows are all very different routes. And then soap operas again. So everything I'm working on, I'm thinking, how are we ever going to make this TV show? How are we going to make this low budget thing? How am I going to make that big thing? Because the kinds of things that they're asking us to do now don't have characters kiss, don't do crowd scenes. Well, that doesn't really work for things that we've been developing for 2 years. We can't undevelop those or change those scenes, so you're going to have to find ways around it. And the industry is in the process of draft codes and consultations and documents and drafts of documents right now to figure out how this is happening. It's happening in the UK. I'm sure it's happening in Hollywood. And we're all throwing our 2 cents in, but we're also sitting by and trying to see for how are we gonna do this. So there is that slight thing of I have been productive every day, but my productivity has gone down compared to the average, in the sense of part of the reason it's dropped maybe 2 pages less per day is because there's more news to assimilate in the morning. There's more people you want to catch up with and say, are you okay? But then there's this also thing, the motivation of the more we feel that at the end of the line, this script is going to go and get budgeted and get made, the more motivated you are, the more real it feels to you. And because everything's a little bit up in the air right now, we don't know if what we're producing is going to get made next month, next year, or not at all. So the combination of, are people going to want to see this thing, and am I even going to be able to present it to them? You have to have real discipline and sort of be able to wall that off in order to keep being productive. So I think a lot of screenwriters and storytellers are struggling right now. Definitely the first week of lockdown, all the screenwriters on Twitter were saying, I know I should be more productive than ever this week, but is it just me? I haven't written a word. And I was the same. I couldn't write hardly anything for the first week. I really struggled. And then, as time wore by, I got into a rhythm. But it is still a little bit of a mental struggle every day to just keep telling the story you're telling, because you've got so much other stuff going on in your mind. So it's a solace, but it can be hard to allow yourself to give yourself mental permission to go off to that imaginative world and step out of the world that we're in, when sometimes it feels like the world's burning down around your ears.
It's fascinating that what you were just saying about how what's that transition period going to look like? And of course, it's not all going to be in the same sequence, of course, because the industry, it's not it's not sort of in these silos of the UK, the US, or it's even more diverse than that, obviously, and there's a lot of overlap in terms of people moving. Travel restrictions presumably going to be who knows, that it may be an extended period that we're unable to kind of travel internationally and so on, and maybe not everybody will be able to travel. They're talking about having some kind of health passport or something to permit people to get on airplanes and so on. And I just, you just wonder, what's that overlap period going to look like on the screen for people as we kind of come to the end of our Netflix kind of playlists that we've created, and we're looking for the next show to land, and suddenly we're presented with something that looks visually very different. Are you hearing the same kind of thing, Erik? Are you having these kind of conversations in the States? From a distribution point of view, have you just got a big back catalog, or what do things look like right now?
Yeah, well, I mentioned at the beginning that that disruptive times allow for people to be disruptive, and there's a greater opportunity to try and fail because everyone expects you to fail. So I'm actually really excited about trying things that we would never be able to do in the normalcy of the industry. For example, we were the first small movie we distributed, comedy out of Ashland, Oregon, was the first movie to do the virtual box office, where we had already lined up our theaters. We're going to art houses, and we said, "You're great partners. We want you to still sell tickets, but do it virtually, and we'll split the box office 50-50 with you." And so we were this little movie was the #1 movie in America, but the lowest grossing #1 movie in history. So it's like this little tongue-in-cheek, we're having fun with it, and the fact that it's sad to see the industry, but that idea of, well, if we're going to be good partners, let's share the box office ticket sales with our theatrical partners. Another movie we're going to go to theaters for a one night only event. It's called Jump Shot. Steph Curry, basketball player, produced it. It's a beautiful story, doc. And we couldn't do theaters, and so we went to a 3-day premiere on a platform that no one's ever heard of, that allowed us to see in real time data and dollars and to control, which is always the problem with digital release. You don't know in days or weeks or months after, and you have no idea who saw it. It's a real, there's no visibility. So we were just trying new things, and these things are working. Will they work in the future? I just tell, when people call and say, "Hey, can we do that again?" I'm like, I have no idea if this is a model or just as a moment that we just stumbled across something. So don't make predictions. But I think that our company will fill that void of being nimble and looking at the opportunities that are out there, while studio is going to have tremendous challenges trying to, because most of them are just waiting right now. They're not making any action because they don't know what to do, rightly so. It's big risk. They're going to delay their movies. Is it risky to put a movie out on digital first? Yes. So nimble, small companies, entrepreneurs, artists, creators can navigate this in a much greater way. And that's why I'm excited about the people you're in your conference right now, is that there's a real chance to do something significant.
So is that a word of encouragement to people who are in that independent space to kind of collaborate more? How do we do that? What does that look like practically speaking? Have we got to jump on more Zoom calls and kind of figure this thing out because there isn't a textbook to go to?
I think in the film space, everyone is saying that the downfall of the independent is coming or is here. I don't think that's true at all. I think the problem is going to be the funding and then the buyers, the distribution. Everyone's saying it's a buyer's moment or it's a seller's moment. We don't know. But I can tell you that it's neither. Some people are buying. Some platforms are buying, like Netflix and Hulu, and others are buying, but they're not buying the things that you're making. A lot of the films we tend to see, and it's also it's not really a seller's market. It is a seller's market in a sense that there is activity happening. But I think that more and more of these big platforms, they see the data, they know what they want, they're going to get in early with originals. And so the independent has to find a new way with funding and with distribution to reach an audience that I think is there, just more niche-y.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, isn't it? I was just thinking about some of the new kind of platforms that have emerged even since we maybe chatted this time last year. There's, I was thinking of Quibi. I don't know if you guys have taken a look at that, but of course, a lot of these platforms, and Apple TV is kind of the same as well, in that they are, kind of chasing the content right now, right? They're still in production on, well, they're not in production anymore, but they have a very small platform of original content. And so I wonder if companies like that, especially Quibi, maybe perhaps are gonna struggle, especially as they've invented a new format, they've created a new type of content, or whether they're going to have to go back and rethink and maybe license and cut content to make it fit appropriately for that platform. I don't know. Any thoughts in that? I guess it's just all a big question mark really for everyone.
Well, I won't have the final word. I'll let Stu do that. But I think there's no more excuses. And this is where you can be a little bit harder on the creatives that there is a existing short form platform that can be monetized. It is called YouTube. There is there's more distribution options than ever. There's more ability to take a story into an audience, whether it's a book, a music, or it's movies even, or shows. It's not easy. It's not a clear path. But if you are waiting around for someone to call you or email you and want your story, it ain't going to happen. You have to keep finding your own way, building your partnerships, be in collaboration with the community, do new things, create exceptional work that can't be ignored, and pay your dues and be thankful for the things you do along the way. I mean, this is extraordinary for anybody to be able to be a creator and actually feed themselves and live, have an existence, and to do the thing that they love and want to do. So it's a long-term vision. It's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's encouraging or discouraging.
That's good. Stuart, maybe you can be the final word on this, and maybe encourage those that are in lockdown, creative, maybe just trying to decide whether to collaborate, to hunker down and write more, or.
Well, I would start by echoing exactly what Erik said. I think it's an amazing time to be a creative entrepreneur, not just a storyteller, but an entrepreneur, because as I said earlier, crisis breeds opportunity. And it's an amazing time for that right now. I think before the lockdown happened, there was a bit of a format gold rush going on, which is very similar probably to what happened in Hollywood in studio set up in Hollywood and made it work, and everybody else said, well, let's set up our own studio. And before you know it, you had 6 or 7. You had Paramount, Fox, all those guys making movies. Netflix really were the first digital streaming studio. And the reason why we now have Peacock and HBO Max and all these buyers out there, which a lot of agents are very high on, and it's all these new buyers, is that everybody wants a piece of that action. Now, we all know that more of these things are going to start up than are ultimately going to survive. Even before the crisis came along, I was always talking with people like, who do you think is going to be around in 5 years? Definitely Netflix, definitely Disney, definitely Amazon. But of the others, who's going to survive? Really?
Yeah.
Because it can't possibly last. I mean, people are going to end up having to have, unless people completely give up their cable subscriptions and port over and are prepared to put enough of their monthly income to a suite of 10 different streamers. But even then, I think that there's more than enough programming coming through those bigger Netflix and Disney pipelines that they're probably not going to do that. But right now, there are a lot of buyers who are trying to claw for a lot of space. So if you have the wherewithal and the talent and the focus to come up with a story that can be told within financial limitations and that people want to see, I think there's a very good field out there, but you've got to be good. You've got to do it in the right timing and in the right way. But it is possible. The script I've just written can be shot for $200,000 with 5 actors and a crew of less than 10. And it could be done soon. And I think the one thing that the pandemic has shown us is there is a huge amount of drama going on behind everyone's front door. You don't need to have a big battle or be off in space or be back in Middle Earth. There are all kinds of crises that people are going on. Next door to you is a nurse who's working 15-hour shifts in a hospital, seeing 10 people die a day and saving 5 other lives. And there's a couple who were about to divorce, but they got stuck together with each other for 3 more months. And people having problems with their dogs. And there's billions of problems out there in your personal life, in your work life. So as Erik said, you really have no excuse. That's the reason I just wrote my script, is I was talking to someone about how all the tools are at your fingertips now. And I said, film students have got no excuse now. Like if I had had this stuff back in when I was started out, I could only wish for this. And as I was walking home, I thought, hold on. Not only have they got no excuse, I've got no excuse. It doesn't matter that I just made a Hollywood movie. At the end of the day, I'm a storyteller, and it doesn't matter what the budget is, as long as I'm telling a good story. So why don't I write something? Even if it just is a plan B or a plan C to the bigger project, just write something that you could, that Mickey Rooney thing of, let's put the show on right here, and I would just encourage people to look at the drama in your street. Look at the drama in your house. Look at the drama in the hospital down the street, and try and come up with the maximum conflict and the maximum cultural and spiritual resonance with the minimum number of people and the minimum number of locations. Get excited by that challenge. Don't get intimidated by it. Get kind of turned on by it and say, how can we come up with a great story with just $100,000 and my iPhone and my friends and that actor I met? Like, just go out and do it. You will never regret it. You will never regret doing it. I guarantee you. Even if it doesn't sell, you will have an amazing experience. And if you sell it, it's a bonus.
I was going to say, have you ever made a movie like that before, Stuart?
and it actually worked, made money. But even if it didn't, I paid for myself to go through my own film school.
That's great.
And so
I like it.
Yeah, you can do it for a quarter of the price that I spent on exam now in 2020.
So we're going to see a whole bunch of remakes of 12 Angry Men and, single location films like that. That's great.
There's so many interesting stories out there to be told.
That's good. What a great point to close this conversation on. Thank you both, Erik and Stu, all the way from London there and Nashville. Thank you so much for joining us. I know that we'll probably have a ton of questions, and I'll be in touch again with you both soon. But thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate that. And just stay safe where you are. And we look forward to watching the creative work that you guys both get involved in going forward. So bless you guys.